Professor Tim Noakes is one of the 22 founding members of the International Olympic Committee and is a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine. He is one of the world's leading authorities on the science of sport and has developed key scientific concepts into sport that have redefined the way elite athletes and teams approach their professions and challenge conventional global thinking in these areas. Controversially, Professor Noakes has made an about turn on carbo loading and tweeted, "Admitting fallibility is for the scientist what confession is for the devout." Through his new book, The Real Meal Revolution, Professor Noakes now advocates low carb, high fat, high protein. This is our conversation. You always have a smile on your face, 99% of the time. What's the problem? What's going on?
Well, I'm a runner, and as soon as you start running, that's the key to your life. And then, of course, I discovered the diet, and the two in combination give you this primal feeling of goodness and health.
The previous theory that you held dear, carbo loading, that's where that term was popularized in South Africa at least. What was that all about, carbo loading?
In 1970s, some Scandinavians developed a muscle biopsy technique where they would take a needle and put it in your muscle, and they would cut off a little bit of muscle, take it out, and then measure the contents of chemicals in the muscle. And they found that as you got tired, you used up the sugar in the muscles, the glycogen. And they speculated or said that the more glycogen you started with, the better you could perform. And so then we started saying, gee whiz, you can reduce exercise to one factor, how much glycogen or sugar you have in the muscles at the start. And the only way you can get lots of sugar in the muscle is to eat lots of carbohydrates, 600, 700 grams a day. And so I bought in. I mean, here I am.
Could you see the results though?
Yes, but if you look back at the literature, it was very poorly defined studies. They were terrible, terrible. But because they were great Scandinavian scientists, everyone said, gee, it has to be true. We repeated those studies in 2000 and found no effect. We found that, but because we had now done a study where we took athletes and told them they were getting carbohydrates, carbo loading, but in the one, we gave them a placebo that tasted like sugar but wasn't. And so they both started, one had lots of glycogen in their muscles and the other group didn't. And at the end, there was no difference in performance. But because you're so brainwashed, and it's called groupthink, that's what happens. We said, oh, we must have made an error in the research. There must be something wrong with the research methods. And we didn't say, well, actually, it might disprove the whole theory.
So our psychology is to blame for those false findings.
Yeah,
you said groupthink.
Groupthink, which is you all think the same and you exclude anyone who thinks an alternatively and you demonize them.
Now, it wasn't just a paper that you published, around the high carb thing. It was your message. You were Tim Noakes, the carbo loading guy.
Yeah.
It was your life to an extent.
Yes.
And I think you tweeted something along the lines of, you fessing up is like the devout making a confession. Yeah. So you felt this emotionally when you thought perhaps you had it wrong after so many years. Was that a difficult thing to come to grips with?
No, it wasn't difficult for me to say I'm wrong. That's easy.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. The difficulty was I knew what the outcome would be, and I never expected it to be, in fact, as inflamed as it was.
So your gospel message at some stage was one that you needed to reject. What did that feel like? Did you feel a sense of responsibility, of remorse, of pain and anguish? Could you sleep?
Not at all. It was just fantastic. Because you have to understand that my life changed within 1 hour, literally within an hour. So I'd just written my second last book called Waterlogged, which attacked the sports drink industry and showed how the industry had manipulated science and sports medicine organizations to give information that was totally wrong and completely unscientific. And I was on the other side, and I was also demonized on that one. But eventually I wrote a book which took 30 years, and I finished it the one night, and in the middle of the night my brain said to me, you get up tomorrow morning and you run and you don't stop running for the rest of your life. That's what it told me. The last time it spoke to me was in 1967 when I was in California, and my brain woke me up and said, you will study medicine at the University of Cape Town. It was a few weeks after Chris Barnard had performed the first human heart transplant. So I've had these two messages in my life, you see. The one was to do medicine, and the other one was to get up at 6 o'clock and run. So at 5 to 6, my brain woke me up, and I sort of struggled out the door, put on my running clothes, and I struggled around the flattest course in my area, and it was terrible. So I've run comrades at a huge pace up these monster hills, and here's this little hill in Constantia, and I reached the top, and my heart rate's 150, and I feel like I'm about to die. So I said, okay, something's got to change. So I went home, and by chance, and I mean, life is all about chance, there's an email saying lose 6 kilograms in 6 weeks and without hunger. So I said, but that's bogus. And then I noticed the 3 scientists were really highly respectable scientists, and I knew I could trust them. So I went and bought their book, and an hour later I said, that's it, I've eaten my last carbohydrate. And within a week, it was magic. And in 4 weeks, my running just came back. I went back 20 years. I just went back to a 40-year-old. Just within 5 weeks, my running was the same speed as I had done in the 40s. And I couldn't believe it. I just got this urge of enthusiasm and energy. And so then that I knew, then, okay, so now it's a matter of time before we can tell the rest of the world that this is what happens.
There's lots of terms thrown around. There's banting, which I don't understand. There's the paleo way, or paleontological eating. What is it about?
So my understanding is that humans evolved in Africa, and the reason we got this big brain was because we could catch animals and we ate them nose to tail. We ate everything. And that included a lot of fat. And if you want to build a big brain, you've got to have a lot of fat in the diet. And it goes even further, like 200,000 years ago in Mossel Bay at Pinnacle Point. It's thought that we then started eating a lot of fish as well.
Literally at Mossel Bay,
absolutely.
Humanity began to eat fish.
Well, and high concentrations, because all of a sudden there was this massive fish and shellfish which was available, provided what we think were omega-3 polyunsaturated fats, and it's thought that they really helped the brain grow very quickly. And that then made the conversion of us to these carnivorous animals eating mainly fat and protein. And the carbohydrates we ate were in the Cape flora. That's what they were, these bulbs, the geophytes, which are very difficult to digest. And so under those circumstances, we weren't designed to eat carbohydrates and to metabolize carbohydrate. And we have, in my view, a condition called carbohydrate insulin resistance or carbohydrate intolerance. And so that's my case. I'm profoundly insulin resistant or carbohydrate intolerant. And when people like myself eat a lot of carbohydrate, we just get sick. We get fat, but we're not just fat, we get very sick as well. And so my message is, or the paleo message is, that we evolved to eat mainly fat and protein and some carbohydrate, but not the refined sweet stuff that we're given today. And that if you force people with this insulin resistant to eat a lot of carbohydrate, they will get fat, they will get diabetic. And that's exactly what we've seen since 1977. This obesity diabetes epidemic has just taken off, and it's going to cripple the world financially, and it already is crippling the world financially.
What can I absolutely not eat and drink? Just forget about it.
The book fortunately has a green, a yellow, and a red list.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to look for, the green list or the red list.
So there's is it a definitive list?
Yeah, the definitive list. If you eat that green list, you will not be obese, you will not be diabetic, and you will be in perfect metabolic balance.
Is there something on the green list that can take care of that urge I have for something sweet, or that urge I have for something salty, or that urge I have for
something fatty?
A muffin.
The muffin, yes, let's get to the muffin. Sugar addiction is as addictive as cocaine and heroin, and that's what's really happening.
Literally as addictive as cocaine and heroin.
It probably is even more addictive.
When you say sugar, what do you mean? Because I understand there are different types of sugar out there.
Great. Sugar is, when I refer to that, I mean sucrose. That's the white stuff you add to your tea and coffee. It's made up of fructose and glucose.
As bad as cocaine.
Yeah, that is as bad as cocaine. Yeah,
sure.
And that's the real problem we see. And that's what drives your eating behavior every 3 hours. Now, once you get onto the green list and you cut out all sugar-containing foods, all of a sudden you only want to eat every 6, 7, 8 hours, because now you're being driven by your conventional inbuilt controls for hunger, and not these false addictive controls which have happened in the last 30 or 40 years.
How can we change our lifestyles to accommodate this type of eating, firstly? And secondly, how can we make it more affordable?
Well, let's look at firstly the next book we're writing is This Diet on 30 Rand a Day. It can be done. And the key is you have to look at eggs and offal. Offal is the healthiest foods you can eat.
Offal as in everything?
Yeah, everything
from the
in the
animal.
gut of the animal. That's where the nutrient-dense foods are and what you should be eating. Livers and the pancreas and the intestine.
And how do you intend serving that up?
Well, historically, we always did.
Yeah.
You know, you go to the culture in northern Britain and Scotland, they ate a lot of that. So we've just got to refine those ways of eating. Okay. So offal is cheap. Eggs are the most nutritious foods on this planet, and they are cheap. Sardines and fish are relatively cheap. That type of fish is cheap. And offal, and you can then live extremely healthily on a low cost. The problem is that the cereals and grains are subsidized, which also brings the price down. You made the point about it's a lifestyle. That's right, this is not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And unfortunately, as soon as you leave home, all the food is pre-prepared and it's high carbohydrate because that lasts. And you just can't eat that food. So we have to change the environment. And I think that's going to happen. We're going to find more and more of these foods that we're talking about are going to become available. And people are going to realize you either eat well or you die badly. And that's your choice. And if you die badly, the costs are enormous. If you have diabetes and you're sick for 30 years, or you have dementia, dementia is probably the most expensive disease there is because people survive, but they're not productive and they live for 20 or 30 years.
That's 100%. Profoundly important.
It is, and it might be 10% of the patients, it might be 20%. But on the same lecture, people are saying that the chemotherapy that we use today in cancer is finished. In 10 years' time, it will not. We will be starving cancer cells of glucose. That will be the key way to prevent cancer.
But there's a macro picture that you alluded to earlier. Eating badly has macroeconomic effects in addition to poor health effects.
Well, the prediction is that the United States of America, their medical services will be bankrupt in 2026.
And that's directly related to eating?
Obesity and diabetes, which are directly related to food. And they've also said that the fiscal deficit in the United States of America has to be solved within 10 years, but they can't unless they solve the medical problem as well. And the only way they can do that is they have to take on the food industry. Processed food industry is the cause of the obesity diabetes epidemic. They know it, they've declared it.
So when you call your book The Real Meal Revolution, there's some truth in that. In a sense, you are actually talking about a revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key is that you have to understand you've got to look after your own health because no one else is going to be looking after it for you. Tragically, the pharmaceutical industry benefits by having more sick people, and so that their focus is on making healthy people believe they're ill, and that, for example, the preventive medicines like cholesterol-lowering drugs, which are essentially ineffective in healthy people.
What are your motivations?
To follow the truth. That's ultimately my goal. And I'm following the truth for myself because I am diabetic, and it's caused by the eating that I did. And I realize that this is the global problem. There is nothing bigger in the world than obesity, diabetes. Nothing different. Nothing is bigger.
When you say there's nothing bigger in the world than diabetes?
I mean the financial implications, the costs involved are so great, and it's a completely preventable disease.
Bigger than AIDS, bigger than malaria, bigger than cancer.
It dwarfs all of them. That's because it is the single one that is going to cost so much for us and really threatens Western civilization. So I don't know what happens when you bankrupt the United States of America, which is going to happen within 10 years. I don't know what the implications are for the future of the world. I don't know what the implications are for every country, and this country too will run out of money for its medical services before 2026. What do you do then when we have to restrict access to medicine profoundly because we just simply can't treat all these obese diabetics?
If I only had the capacity to walk away with one thing, what would that one thing be? Besides your book.
I think the message is that we die from what we put in our mouths. That's your choice. And we're trying to say, take it seriously. And unfortunately, medicine has been hijacked by the pharmaceutical industry, which says actually the reason why you get sick is because you haven't got one of our pills in your body. And take this pill, and that's completely wrong.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I really
pleasure.
appreciate it. So it's The Real Meal Revolution, changing the world one meal at a time. It is available everywhere. You might need to wait for the back order. Have you taken care with of the back order issues?
It's into its 7th printing now, and that's up to about 80,000 books printed, which for South Africa is massive.
Yeah. It's flying off the shelves. I literally needed to wait a month
Yeah.
to get it.
But that makes it exclusive, and we'll eventually sell our 100,000. Our goal is to sell in between 1 million and 10 million globally, but that's the sort of, we'll get there.
Seeing as you've been losing quite a bit of weight, I'm sure you need some more shirts in your wardrobe. So a small token of our appreciation for coming here today from Robert Daniel. You are more than welcome to go pick up a shirt of your choice at their store here at the waterfront.
Fantastic, I look forward to that.
Thank you very much
Thanks
indeed.
so much.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.